is that they were hired specifically due to Chief Slawley not being able to deal with this.
Yeah, no, that was not the case.
That was done way in advance.
Way in advance.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to know that. And then I understand that when the retainer did happen, and it's good to know it was that far away, if what I'm about to ask you is correct. I understand the retainer with Navigator was $75,000 on a fee-for-service basis, but it was maybe not paid up front, but it was a $75,000 cap, which is usually less than what their normal retainer of $100,000 is. Is that about accurate?
I don't know if I actually knew what the details of that retainer were.
Okay. Now, I also understand the Ottawa Police Service had retained the assistance from a company called Advanced Symbolic Inc., also known as ASI.
Yes.
Are you aware of that? When was ASI retained?
Certainly in advance of this occasion. Chief Slawley had brought a representative from ASI to the board basically to talk about the benefits of ASI, and he felt that there was that their services could be useful.
Okay. And what was ASI doing for the Ottawa Police Service exactly? Could you explain that? I have an understanding, but I'd like you to explain it.
I'd like Chief Slawley to explain it, if you don't mind, because I mean, I think my very, very limited understanding of ASI is that it basically searches many, many, many sites and sort of pulls out key words to create an impression of public opinion, if you will.
Right. Would it be fair to say when the ASI was discussed with you, did they refer to the phrase data analytics?
Probably, yes.
Okay. So they get all this stuff and then they give you in a report or to Chief Slawley the public perception of what's going on so that Chief Slawley and his team know how to react, right?
I think generally speaking, that's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to take you to one part, and I'm wondering if you're aware of this, and it's come up in some of the production. Do you remember when it was announced, I believe the Ottawa Police Services had mentioned that they had been in touch with Provincial Child and Family Services about apprehending children in the protest? Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
Were you aware that it was Navigator who told them to do that?
No.
Thank you. Now, I just want to get into sort of your, what you had said. You stated that you had an intention to work together and put aside political differences, and it's good to hear that, and I'm sure the public is happy to hear that as well. I'm just going to have to ask you, can you tell me about your relationship between yourself and Mayor Watson?
I mean, I don't know what there is to tell. I have worked with Mayor Watson for a very long time. We have worked on many files together over the years. I think I enjoyed more confidence in the mayor until relatively recently, until this term of council, when I detected just perhaps a change in Mayor Watson's general approach, and that goes far beyond me. He had, for whatever reason, at the start of this term, decided to build more of a coalition approach to governing than he had in the past. And I wasn't part of that coalition, so I suppose in some ways became a bit more of an outsider than I had been before. But when I had worked with him on a transit commission, for example, we were landing a Presto card that didn't work. We worked very well together. Okay.
Could you agree with me that the tension also started when you decided you announced, at least to him, maybe privately or maybe publicly, that you intended to bring a motion to fund litigation as against Bill C-21? Do you remember that?
Well, I don't think that's when it started. That was just one of many, many, many disagreements politically we had. And listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with political disagreements. I think it's actually quite healthy for our democracy. So we don't have to agree on every issue. I think the issue is when it becomes personal.
Okay. And so moving on to the issue with the hiring of the interim chief, you heard yesterday, and in the recording we heard that Mayor Watson claimed that he had concerns about your and your council's appointment of the proposed new interim chief, Matthew Torgan, because there was not enough consultation with stakeholders, right?
Right.
Before Steve Bell became the interim chief, how much consultation was there?
You mean at the very end when he...
Right at the beginning. So when Steve Bell took over as interim chief, how much consultation did Mayor Watson do?
I don't think he did any.
Right. So it's fair to say that the issue that Mayor Watson took with your council or your board appointing a chief on the basis that there was no consultation, it's fair to say he went about it and did no consultation and had his own appointed. Would you say that?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted to cover one point, and I believe it was covered, but just not with the specific association, because there's two police unions, correct? There's the one for senior officers and then the other one. I also understand your evidence that it was also the Ottawa Police Senior Officers Association, which is those with ranks of inspector and higher, who also did not want Slolly as their first choice for mayor or for, for chief back in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think I really knew that until, sometime after he was hired.
Okay. And with respect to Chief Slolly's relationship, in your statement, you specifically mentioned he had issues with the relationship with the Community Health Resource Center. Can you elaborate on what that was?
Yeah, it was just an observation that I had made through the budget process in the setting of the 2022 budget. The Ottawa Community Health and Resource Centers came forward with a proposal really for some alternative service delivery in terms of addressing mental health calls and addictions calls and housing crisis calls. And there was a lot of tension through the budget process between those organizations that I observed.
Okay, and was that organization, the Community Health and Resource Centers, I take it if there was issues in the budget, it had to do with tension between funding that the Ontario Police Service was getting versus funding they were not, or et cetera? Is that what it was?
Ontario Police Service?
Oh, sorry, Ottawa Police Service. So the Ottawa Police Service was getting a lot higher funding, I take it. They wanted more funding, and was that the tension?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was that there's a growing perspective in our community that police are responding to calls for crisis situations like someone experiencing homelessness or someone having an addictions crisis or mental health crisis, and that isn't always the right response. And there are growing cries in the community to set up a new system where if you called 911, you might be calling for a paramedic, you might be calling for fire, you might be calling for police, or you might be calling for a mental health worker. And so I think there are a lot of voices in the community, including community health and resource centers, that would like to see, at least an opportunity where, if you might be dispatching more than one, you might dispatch fire and police and a mental health worker. But right now, police are the responders because they take up that space, not because they're necessarily trained in crisis response of that nature, or not because they're necessarily the best response. And so I think there was some tension between Chief Slowly and the community that would like to see a change in, some modest change in police response to those types of calls.
That was very detailed. Has anyone ever told you maybe you should be the chair of the police board? You know?
Not recently.
Yes. So my last question is this. Is it fair to say that one of the biggest contentions with respect to getting information from Chief Slowly wasn't so much just with the information based on everyone's public statements within your council? What they wanted to know is, can you give us a date when the protest will end, and can you give us a date if it's not going to end, how you're going to remove them? Is that fair? That's really what you wanted to know. That's what your constituents were bugging you about in all the emails.
I mean, in broad strokes, I think that's fair.
Right, and Chief Slowly, and to no fault of his own, and he couldn't tell you that because he didn't even know.
No, and if those resources hadn't arrived, or perhaps if we hadn't had extra tools like the Emergencies Act, they might still be here.
Well, and I understand the extra tools, and I guess we can argue about that. But
sure.
Would you agree with me that if there was a like order to the Emergencies Act to remove the protesters, et cetera, as long as you had the resources that, you know, based on your knowledge as a former chair of the police service board, the police could have removed these protesters simply with a court order on the same terms. Is that fair?
I don't know if that's fair. I don't think that I'm the person to assess that.
Thank you. I'll make the pitch to him instead. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next is the Government of Canada. And as you come up, if I can just be clear, I'm sure you know this, Mr. Mijikovsky, is that if it becomes relevant, the question about salary with another witness, or you somehow becomes irrelevant to this commission, you can of course renew the question. I'm sure you know that, but I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Ms. Deans. I'm Brendan Vinny, and I'm one of the lawyers for the Government of Canada on this inquiry. I'm just going to try to ask you some hopefully less controversial questions about your experience and your capacity as the board chair for this jurisdiction at the time.
Sure.
And I'm going to do so by reference to some of the documents that you've looked at already, but I'm going to focus on some particular facts that come out of them. May I ask to pull up OPB 401624? This is the February 1st board update document, Councillor Deans, which just to situate you, February 1st was the Tuesday after the initial convoy week